like
Yeah.
whatever.
And it takes work to get there. Talk about, a battlefield. It takes training.
Absolutely.
It takes planning. It takes intention. It takes lots of conversations ahead of time. I mean,
Yeah.
all of the things to get to that moment are very real, and they're struggles in and of themselves. And so it takes time to train our minds and our hearts and our bodies to get to that space. And I think, you mentioned coming in with trauma. I from both sides, in our marriage, we came in with, first of all, we came with very different experiences,
Sure.
you know, sexually before we got married. And then, I brought in, myself, this trauma and this um, space that I never thought I would be invited back to. I thought never again, am I going to be there? And of course, that is not the Lord's design. His design was for us to always be invited back to a space of intimacy
Mhm.
and honesty and transparency. And so, um, you know, I love the imagery of the battlefield and the reality of the work, the hard work it takes
There's a
to.
training involved, and I think sometimes I think the bedroom is a training ground for intimacy, for communication, for unified front, for battling it out. Sometimes I think there's just times when um, there are times that you're going to roll over and go, we can come back to this tomorrow.
Yeah,
Like we can come back to that conversation. Um, you need
it's
I'm
just
gonna
not
need
going to work
some
right now.
minutes. I'm gonna need some sleep, and then we can go for it. I know we've all heard like don't go to bed angry, and I get that, and I don't have any problem with that. But there are times when I'm gonna go to bed
Yes, yeah,
angry or
and
not. Bed is gonna be a better thing than to try to keep doing this. So I definitely think that there are times when I think like even talking about sex becoming a place of worship for us can be kind of romanticized, where it's like then you think every single time you have these moments that they're just these glorious worshipful times. Well, no.
newsflash.
I'm not gonna like sell something to you that's like, okay, put this mindset and then every time it's gonna be amazing. um no, I don't think every time we go to a Sunday morning worship service are we just in this space like we are when you're at Passion with 60,000 other people. Like there are things, there are different experiences in worship that, sometimes that's where the rubber meets the road though, is that Sunday
Yes.
where you don't really feel like going, but you show up because you're committed to being a part of that body of Christ. And won't he do it? He's going to come in and teach you something in a small little nugget of a song you don't even like, or a sermon that you've tuned in and out of 50 times in that 30 minutes. Like, because you showed up.
Yes.
God's faithfulness is never, deficient, but because we show up and we're committed to the mundane task on a Sunday of going to church, sometimes it's the bedroom. You're going to show up for a mundane task because
Because
you've committed.
it's good for you.
It's good for the other person in that moment, even if it's not something that you need or want. Like, I don't need to go to church today. I'm good. Had a great week, doing great. I don't need to go. No, you've committed to go. And so I think when we approach that same space, and it's not we don't have the right to say no. We can talk about that later. But I think sometimes we just get to where like, I'm not in the mood. So, but sometimes the other part of us, that spouse of ours, they are.
Yeah.
And we've committed to the whole thing, not just to what we can get out of it. And that's a hard concept, and that takes a long time. I say a long time. It takes a consistent time of really kind of putting yourself aside. Marriage is a whole bunch of sinners forgiving each other.
Yes.
It's a whole bunch of selfish people laying it down, and being able to be. And again, that's why it is tender. That's why these conversations are not easy, because we do have so many different stories and so many different backgrounds and so many different experiences that maybe you haven't had just one partner your whole life. And so you have things that you have some baggage, you have stuff, but having these conversations, I think, really starts to help peel back some of what's holding people back. And I think it just, a lot of the women that I have conversations with and that I'm picking up on is that there's a stereotype that women just don't want it and that men are hungry all the time for it. And I'll tell you, really, from my point of view, that's just a stereotype. And I think if we can cut some of that and really have good, wholesome conversations with each other, then I think we're going to find that sometimes we don't want it because we think we don't, or we have some sort of mentality because of just everyone else around us. But we pick up on that in other ways too, whether it's with church. Well, I don't like that church because they have, loud music, or I don't like that church because their kids ministry is just boring. Or we get into this idea that we need to find the perfect place and the perfect thing and the ideal situation. And instead, God's saying, you've committed yourself to this space and helping you bring, newness or freshness, health, better communication or whatever to this space. So instead of shopping around, we hone in and reroute. And none of this is easy.
No.
It's worth it. It's so worth it. You start to be able to get to the level of intimacy that those old conversations that were really hard to have are now embedded and ingrained in your rhythms. They're part of who you are. And so new things will come up, but
for sure,
some of that, you get to iron it out as you go. It's rewarding to be able to.
It gets better and better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've loved having conversations like this and conversations with wives about their sex lives, and just being able to ask the question, like, how is sex? When's the last time you just asked your girlfriend, but the reality is, when we do ask those questions, we get to also think back about my first year as a wife. It was like traumatizing.
I think I've blanked it out. Like, I don't
like, talk about just tears, a lot of tears. And I never could have imagined, what we have progressed to. And that's what the time and the work, and like you said, those conversations that were really hard at one point have become a part of who you are now and your rhythm. And then you continue to build and grow on that.